This is the DJI Rs2 and the Rs3 Pro, two of the most popular gimbals on the market. Alright, now before we start, I did get a new mic. Let me know how it sounds to the 5 people that watch all my videos. Is it any better? Is it the same? Let me know down in the comments. Now, if you're wondering which one of these gimbals to get, there's a few things that you need to know. The first one being the name change between the new generation and the old generation. The old generation of gimbals was named the Rs2 and the Rs2. The Rs2 being the smaller, lighter, more affordable gimbal, and the Rs2 being the heavier, more expensive gimbal. For the newer generation, they changed up how they name these gimbals. The smaller one being the Rs3, and the bigger one being the Rs3 Pro. The Rs3 being more comparable to the Rs2 from the previous generation, and the Rs3 Pro being more comparable to the Rs2. Now notice how I actually own the bigger version of both these gimbals, the Rs2 and the Rs3 Pro. I've actually never owned the smaller version of these gimbals, the Rs2 and the Rs3, even though I rock lighter setups. And there's a very specific reason why I stay away from the smaller version of these gimbals, and we'll get into that later in the video. Now with this new generation of gimbals, the Rs3 and the Rs3 Pro, there's a lot of pretty significant upgrades that they added. And the differences between these two models, the Rs3 and the Rs3 Pro, are getting a lot smaller, and they're becoming a lot more similar. For example, they both had a detachable battery grip, which is a huge difference between their previous model, with the Rs2 not having one of those. So now you're able to buy extra battery grips and switch them out on both the Rs3 and the Rs3 Pro. Now in the newer generation, they both have 1.8-inch OLED screens, and they're both touchscreens unlike the Rs2. DJI also allows you to lock these touchscreens, which is very clutch because I found myself changing the settings by accident and my thumb ends up grazing the screen all the time. Now in the newer Rs3, you can still change modes even when the touchscreen is locked, because it has a physical switch on the side of the gimbal. This switch allows you to change settings really quickly, like from pan follow mode to FPV mode. And what's cool about the FPV mode is that you can also change it to different settings like 3D roll or my favorite, portrait mode. Now with vertical content being extremely popular now with Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, you're able to switch to portrait mode with just a flick of the switch. This saves you a lot of time and effort because back in the day we had to use vertical mounts to get vertical video, and now you can just do it in seconds. You can also change the settings in each of these modes whenever you flip the switch back and forth, like different follow speeds or joystick speeds. Something that the Rs3 models can do and the Rs2 can't is the locking of all the different axes with just a touch of a button. This works very well, and you can set it to where it locks and stays in place, or you can also set it to where it folds in on itself. When I first used this, I was really blown away at how easy and simple it is and how it just works. Another thing that they kept the same in the higher models like the Rs2 and the Rs3 Pro is that it's carbon fiber. The carbon fiber makes it more durable, and it is a lighter material that does help, especially with these bigger gimbals. The Rs3 Pro is slightly bigger than the Rs2, but not enough to make a huge difference. When you're shooting something like a wedding and you're shooting all day with a gimbal like this, then that lighter carbon fiber material goes a long way compared to some of the other gimbals that are metal. Now between these two gimbals, you really can't go wrong either way, especially with the Rs2 being a little bit cheaper now that the Rs3 Pro is out. If the Rs3 Pro is slightly out of your budget, then instead of going to the Rs3, I would actually look into the Rs2. I really don't recommend the smaller version of either of these gimbals, the Rs3 or the Rs2. I don't hear as many people talking about this, but after personally using these gimbals every single week for long work days, I would actually recommend most people get the bigger version. Yes, the smaller version can handle most light mirrorless setups nowadays, but I still would prefer using the bigger one, and that's because of the durability. Now since I do more run and gun, wedding type shoots all day where you're changing locations, you're going back and forth to different places, it's a lot more hectic. Oftentimes I end up locking my gimbal with the camera still on it, throwing it in my car and driving to the next location. And so I find that the durability of the bigger gimbals goes a long way. I've had friends that opted for the smaller version of these gimbals, and don't get me wrong, they work great for the first few months, but after a few different hectic wedding days, the wear and tear and the beating that we put these gimbals through, it really does show. Now of course, if you take extremely good care of your gear and you pack it up right away and you unpack and you shoot in a studio type setting where you control a lot of the variables, then it might be different. For people who shoot events, do weddings, go on tour, for concerts, for these type of shooters, having the bigger, more durable gimbal will really save you money in the long run. Speaking of using and abusing these gimbals, another thing that I noticed is you really can't leave these gimbals in your car in the summertime. And that's because I've noticed that the adhesive on the grip of my gimbals are slowly starting to melt off because of how hot it was in the car. And this is especially apparent because I live in Dallas, Texas, and it gets really hot in the summer, over 100 degrees easily. And so even if you're leaving it in the car for short periods of times, I'd be really careful for that. Now, because of the nature of these gimbals and how much we tend to put them through, that's why I overall do recommend the bigger versions, whether it is the Rs2 or the Rs3 Pro. I still use both of these gimbals on a weekly basis after all that I've put them through in these weddings. My first shooter always gets the Rs3 Pro, and I give the Rs2 to my second shooter. They have put it through a lot of torment, and they both work very good even after all these years. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to check out the Rs2 or the Rs3 Pro, I have links to both of those in the description below. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. To the 5 people still watching, I'll see you next time.